Welcome, everybody. We're going to start promptly. My name is Ed Friedman. I chair Friends of Merrymeeting Bay. For those of you that don't know me, thank you so much for coming tonight. This is going to be great. Yeah, we're one of the only groups in the country, really, that looks at the environment in a holistic fashion. And we do, as the screen says here, we conduct really often cutting edge research. We let that inform our advocacy, some of which is also tip of the spear. We're a land trust. We protected over 1,600 acres of land, and we have an active education program. These are just a few slides here, some pictures of some of those different categories. Multi-year study of how the waters move around in the bay. It's on the website. Very cool animated. Uh, uh, well, an animation. You can look at that in different formats and see how complicated the system is. Many studies over the years of looking at changes in aerial in vegetation, aquatic vegetation, and within a half-mile buffer of the bay, using mussels to determine whether pulp mills are still discharging dioxin, finding PCB hotspots, um, doing active bald eagle work still, and active. If you read the newspaper, you can see we're very involved with PFAS stuff, PFAS chemicals, and the spill over at the former air station in Brunswick. Again, a lot of our advocacy revolves around trying to get safe migratory fish passage. The eel that was killed up here at the Benton Falls Dam on the Sagadahoc River, typical of turbine mortality, and ditto for an alewife here, posting the rivers for fish advisories, fish consumption advisories. And again, who's going to be here tomorrow? Not me or Bud or Martin, but the kids. So this is a really important piece of what we do, getting kids away from their digital devices and hands-on outside as much as possible. And we do this through Bay Days, and we also have in-school visits. And again, we're a land trust. This is a little bit of an outdated slide, but we protected quite a bit of land and about 13 miles of waterfront around the bay, valuable wetland habitat. If you've got friends that couldn't make it tonight, or you want to watch this again, go to our homepage, friendsofmerrymeetingbay.org or FOMB.org, and scroll down the right side. You'll see those same four categories: research, education, land conservation, and so forth. And under education, there's a bunch of links, and one of those is speaker series video link here. And click on that, and then split up by year, and you can find an event page for this event. And at the bottom, there will be a YouTube recording. And here's our series calendar for the season. This program in December is going to be great. World premiere of a living history theater program that we did. Involved a 1-week residency up at the elementary school in Richmond with the PT Theater Company, and looking at the history of Richmond. And the kids focused on ice harvesting, shipbuilding, the mills, and dairy farming. So that should be really fun. So tonight's speaker, Bud has spoken to us a number of times over the years. He's a popular lecturer. He's definitely a raconteur, and he is co-founder and former president of the Tide Mill Institute, which apparently now has a subcommittee studying this evening's strange bit of Maine's coastal industrial history. A native of the coast, Bud knows Maine well. For nearly 40 years, he's led heritage tours of the area for Smithsonian Associates, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, Rhodes Scholar, and other significant groups. He's studied, written, lectured about the region's maritime history, its geography, its environment, and culture. Bud works by poking behind the scenes to understand Maine's people and their way of life, and then finding ways to share that appreciation with others. Former resident of the Mid-Coast, he is now coming to us live from the wilds of Millinocket.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is great to be here with you. I remember a number of the talks that I've given in Bowdoinham and it's just good to be back. Thank you very much. I'm excited about this one. Uh, this will probably be my last uh, tide mill talk because new activities await me even at 90. Tonight, we're focusing on something that's right next to you, and that's why I'm glad that I'm talking about it with your organization. It's right under your feet. You might get muddy a little bit as tonight as we study the history of the Kendall Mill. Next slide. It is a wow of a mill. It really is a big one. Next slide. Okay. The audience for tonight is really four groups, and I hope we have some of them here, and we'll pick up others who come to watch the video later. Tide mill nuts, I see some of the names of them today. They're called molinologists. Historians, Bowdoinhammers, people who really love that area. Tonight it fits with genealogists because of the Kendall family. There's quite a family story here. And then it's an exciting story, really just for ordinary folks. Next. Okay. It's too good a story not to be told. And it's a challenge, really. What I want to do is to challenge Tide Mill Institute. I want to challenge Bowdoinham Historical Society and people in the area to really understand this strange mill that you have. It's not pictured here. This is the Bowdoinham Historical, because it's very unusual, but we're going to focus on the Kendall Mill. Next. Tide Mill Institute. This is how you get in touch with it, info at Tide Mill Institute. We've been going for, I don't know how many years, but we study mills locally and internationally. We're currently very interested in ocean energy, river energy, energy of water, doing something. Okay. Then we have the Bowdoinham Historical Society. Here are the contacts, or this is how to reach Betsy Steen, who is with the Historical Society. Next. Okay. Years ago, there were lots of tide mills all over the place. They looked like this for the most part. And there were plenty of them around in the 1700s and late 1800s. Here's a map of the mills that were between Portland and Woolwich. There were over 50 of mills in that area. They were all cutting lumber. They were all grinding grain or doing other things. Personally, I've documented about 35 tide mills in Maine. I have a colleague in France who has identified the location of over 1,400 tide mills around the world. They were a serious industrial item years ago. Next picture. This was a most, oh, back it up one. This was a most unusual water wheel. It really was huge. It was 20, it stood vertically. It was more than 27 feet in diameter. It operated on both tides, incoming and outgoing. And it operated mills on both sides of your Cathance River. There is no mill that we know of that has done the things that your mill did. Next slide. Here's where it was. I stuck a while there. It was under the bridge at Bowdoinham, Maine. Those of you in the area should go down there and sit there on those benches, look at the river at different tides and think of it. There was 37 feet of water vertically under that mill at high tide. So under that bridge. It was an amazing kind of thing. Next. It had a creative mechanism that's only partially explained. There are one or two things that we don't know about it. It responded to the unusual environment there, and it ran on both, as I said, it ran both tides. Here's the guy who started it. Next slide. Wonderful name, James Madison Kendall. There are other pictures of him. Every picture I've seen has his cane he has his cane with him. He moved to Bowdoinham from Fairfield. That is upriver up the Kennebec River near Waterville. One of his brothers, or he had some brothers, they stayed in Waterville area. One of his brothers made mill wheels for vertical tub wheels. One of them created a turbine and wrote a book about it. Now, historians, pay attention. Next. In the history room of the patent-free library in Bath, there's a treasure trove of information about the Kendall Mill. So far as I know, I've been the only person who's been there to look at it. Serious researchers have to go there for at least two reasons. The book I just mentioned about a Kendall undershot reel is one of them, and is very much described in a thing that's called the Kendall Scroll, a pastiche of documents which describe a patent case. And it answers questions that lawyers or the opposition or whatever wrote about it. And the millwright was one of the brothers of James Kendall. And it gives a lot of real information. There's another set of documents there that you in Bowdoinham should be aware of. They're letters and copies of letters from James Madison Kendall to one of his sons, who was later running one of the two mills on the Cathance. Details of daily activity in the grinding business with specific directions from the senior Kendall who was on to his son William, who was on site in Bath. The salutations of some of those letters are really interesting. Sometimes it's Will, sometimes it's Willie, and once it was Willie Boy. And Willie Boy was being directed to do things quickly and well, and getting material ready for certain customers. Grain, plaster, rock, they were one of the mills they had was grinding stuff. The other stuff was dealing with grain. uh, okay, okay, next slide. Thank you. Back to Bowdoinham. The unusual Kendall wheel attracted visitors. Uh, I'm surprised that you don't hear much about people coming to Bowdoinham, Maine to see things. This was before Ed Friedman got there. But the way that mill was described was very interesting. There were a lot of mechanics. There were mill people. There were metal workers and so forth who came to see what they could of this mill. And the noise of the mill was usually always described. It was almost as if it was um, a beast, like under the water, clashing and creaking, wallowing and growling, the wooden gears. Many people visited Bowdoinham to look and listen to this wheel. One of the mills was a grain and plaster mill. One of them was a grain mill, and one was the Sagadahoc Fertilizer Company. Kendall ran both of them. It was really a unique engineering response to a mid-19th century situation. Next slide. Next. Here's the only picture that there is of the mill, and it's only part of it. It shows the wheel. The wheel, part of the wheel is out of the water. It was like a pinwheel. You know, the kind of plastic pinwheel that you had when you were a kid. It was on a little stick and you blew it and it went around and around. It was that concept. It was like a windmill. The veins here were metal, and there was a large, big tire. They called it a metal tire that went all the way around it, and there were cogs on the tire. Unfortunately, this picture doesn't help you to figure out how it really worked, because the picture was taken when the mill had stopped working and had fallen apart. So this is the remains of the mill. Next picture. Let's move on. and put the Kendall wheel into perspective. Back up, please. Into perspective. And look at a very similar wheel in East Greenwich on the Thames River. It was built there in 1804. And let's meet a guy with an absolutely wonderful name. I hope you'll never forget this name. Olympus Gregory. I wonder if his buddies called him Ollie. He was a mathematician. He co-founded the Royal Astronomy Society. He wrote a massive tome about the slide rule. He wrote many books, and they are deadly to read. One of the more significant ones is titled A Treatise of Mechanics, Theoretical, Practical, and Descriptive, containing remarks on the nature, construction, and simplification of many curious and useful machines. And this was in 1806. It was 2 volumes. I've forgotten how I found out about it, but I had to read it. But the only way I could get it was to get it through interlibrary loan. God bless interlibrary loan. It showed up at the library in Green, Maine. The librarian said, "You're going to like this one, bud." It had a note that said, "This book is not to be taken home. It must be used under the eye of the librarian." It was a book that was published in 1806, 2 volumes. It was huge. Next. This is how he described his work. I'll read it, and I'll try to sound as dull as he did. This is in his introduction. In the exposition of the theory, I have generally proceeded by a series of connected propositions and dependent corollaries, those in each chapter having a manifest relation to each other and flowing naturally from the same source. I have at the same time endeavored to attain a just medium between the fatiguing prolixity of delta and so forth and so forth. But in the book, well, next picture. Next. Oh, one of the chapters, there were 2 chapters that you could online read the index to the book, or the contents of the book, the table of contents. So the one chapter that I really wanted to look at is on the effect of water upon the motion of water wheels. My friend Pat Malone, who is part of Tide Mill Institute, would love this chapter. I won't read it, but he gets into great detail about water wheels. There's a reason I'm telling you about this. Next. Now, I'm going to involve you guys. Look at this for a minute. This is the way that the mill operated on the Thames River in East Greenwich. It too operated on incoming and outgoing water. Well, the wheel is in the middle, And you can see at the upper left and lower right, there are two doors. These doors are open. The river is out here below. The reservoir or the pond is below. So imagine that the water comes in, lower right, comes in, goes through the wheel, and the only way it can get out is up through the upper left. And then suddenly, when the tide changes, something makes these doors, all four of them, work. Next. And here you have, thank you, Ed, for doing what you did here. The one on the left is the one we just looked at, the incoming tide, the water is coming in, up, across the wheel, and out through the upper left. But with these doors that were originally closed, with them open, and the water coming out from the pond, and the tide lowers, the water comes down the right, across the wheel, down the other side. This image was in Ollie's book. And it began to make sense to me for your mill or in Bowdoinham. Next picture. Next. What I want to do now is just to look at some pictures. They are old, but they're the best that the Bowdoinham Historical Society could give me. I want to put you on the hunt with me to try to figure things out. They're fuzzy pictures, they're incomplete. So it's frustrating, but it's all we have. Join me in the search. Next. Here's the bridge. The bridge changed a number of times, but it kept going around here. As you look underneath, what is that? Well, let's try to look at it a little closer. Next picture. I don't know. The wheel is in there somehow, and there it is. Wouldn't it be wonderful to climb down in there? Let's go back to that one. Wouldn't it be wonderful at low tide, Harry Hopcroft, to crawl in there and look at what's there? Next picture. Same bridge. And you can see there's a lot of wood under there doing something. Don't know what. I'm trying to point. I'm pointing here. I don't know if you can see that pointer. It's in the middle. There looks like a wall of some kind. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Next picture. Next picture. Harry Hopcroft, one of our men in the Tide Mill Institute, took this picture this summer or this fall. And these are the sticks. Interesting. What this is a wall, or what one of the boys described about this, and I don't have this here tonight. I should. Uh, he says, my father's idea was to guide the water through, and then he describes the doors opening and closing, and it matches exactly what that diagram does. And then let's keep going down again to about here. Yeah, good. And then he said he said they built a wooden, I've forgotten exactly the term, a wooden berm or something like that in two places on both sides of the wheel. And it allowed the water to flow. There was an opening in it and allowed the water to flow firmly and fast and hard against the vanes of the wheel. Next picture. You can't see much of that's underneath, but here's on the far left this is one of these two was the fertilizer mill. I can't can you tell, Ed, do you know which is which? Okay, we'll ask Ed later. Go back one so we get it.
But I was trying to find my mute button so I could talk to you.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll go back. Oops. Yeah. Yep. There we go. That's where we were. So yeah, as I say, I remember the fertilizer mill. There's a lot of people on this call that probably remember it longer than I do, and I don't think any of those buildings are, none of those are the mill that I recall. I'm not even sure. I think we maybe trying to figure out which way we're looking. Okay, there's the town hall up there. So the mill would have been on the left from this angle. But what I remember is a building back here as a fertilizer mill, sort of sits by the railroad tracks.
Okay. Yeah, Ed's flying around with a very small white flicker there for you folks.
This would have been too close to the, to the water, at least for the mill, the large mill building that
Okay.
I remember.
On the other side of the river, as you can go to that map now, or that plan. Okay.
Yeah.
This is just a diagram that I did early on, and I laid the wheel horizontally. It was vertically. But across the river was the grist mill. And that's where the smelt shanties used to be tied in, okay, to help you folks locally. But how did the power get there? Let's look. Keep going. Oh, there's a four-masted schooner upriver or downriver. So big vessels did get into the Cathance River. And here we are looking at a key picture which helps us. There's a 3, and I think it's the one on the right's a 4-masted schooner. And in the front is a bunch of stuff. And it would be lovely. Let's focus really hard on this bad picture and put the cursor on that nail keg, which is over in the middle there. Okay. There, you see the nail? I wish that were not there, because behind that nail keg is a bevel gear. And that bevel gear turns something. And that bevel gear is on an axle. And that axle goes back away from us to where those cogs are. And those cogs may be reaching down into the cogs that were on the large wheel that's underneath there, sitting vertically. But how did the power get from here? The water has put the power into the cogs and the wheel and the bevel gear. What's next? Next picture. And the pictures get worse. But here's the small wheel on the right. This interacts with the big wheel on the hub of the 27 foot water wheel, comes out to this bevel gear. Down behind this nail keg is a gear that does something. And if you look to the left of the nail keg, the small one, look at that. What does that look like? I've called it a universal gear, but it isn't. It's like a I've seen this arrangement before. Coming out of whatever is behind the large keg, a large bucket here, coming over to that that junction thing, is a short shaft. That shaft joins a longer shaft. That's the junction. And then I don't know how long each of the sections were, but it was 317 feet that the power was passed down on supports beside the bridge to the mill. And then there were similar things coming up this other way, up to the right. Next.
On the left, but if those are actually two pieces, it almost looks like a clutch.
Yeah, okay, that's better. Next. That's a good close-up of it. If any of you tide mill guys want to join in, go ahead. Next. There you can see enlarging the pictures helps us get a sense of it. Next. Next picture. Okay. And then disaster for one of the mills. This is the one over by where the smelt shanties were. This is the grist mill. On the weekend of just before July 1st, at night, in the middle of the night, the mill was on fire. The Kendalls said that they had planned to shut the mill down at 6 o'clock that night. At 11 o'clock that night, the machinery was heard doing its thing, chunking along, and the grist mill burned. Total loss. But there's an indication that they either lost or preserved 840 bags of wheat, 730 bags of oats, and 8 tons of cottonseed. So you can see that that mill was doing a lot of good things. Next slide. So that's where we're at. I want you to take a deep breath for a minute. The one thing that we do not know, we have no indication of, either here or in the east, or with the one in the Thames River. You don't know exactly how they controlled the turning on or off of the current of the wheel as the current changed. Maybe you can figure that out. The description was almost poetical. It talked about how the wheel turned, how the water moved fast, how the water moved, and then it slowed down and stopped and rested, and then began to go the other way. So it was an automatic kind of thing, but nobody has yet found the specifics of that. And my challenge to those of you who are mechanically inclined, try to find that. Next slide. Okay. Questions or comments? This is a little shorter than my usual talks, but I invite you to jump in. I'm going to let Ed run the talk, but I'll jump in as well. Let's talk about it a little bit. Maybe together we can do something here. I'd like to hear from the guys on Tide Mill Institute who are working this. Go ahead.
Bud, there is one comment on the chat thing here from Wayne Sanford. Shaft on the main vertical gear had to go up and down stream. There could have been a bevel gear at each end, one to drive the grist mill and one for the fertilizer mill.
Okay. Yep.
So did you say, Bud, that on the Thames River mill, on that one, they also don't know how the doors open and shut, or they do?
Correct.
Which is it? They don't know?
No, it is not described. I could not find it in what my friend Ollie wrote.
Mm-hmm. Because I certainly would have expected over there that there'd be some pretty good documentation over the years, but maybe it was so common that they didn't. I don't.
There's a very good article written about 5 years ago by an Englishman who attended one of our early Tide Mill Institute conferences, and he goes into a lot of detail, but he doesn't get to that.
So I think Harry has his hand up. I think we can hear you, Harry. I don't know how to do the mute and unmute thing, but it looks like you're unmuted to me. Is that?
I am unmuted, yeah. What I wanted to offer was that the thing that has bothered me the most about figuring out how this thing did its number with the power has been mostly that the wheel is described in several places as turning in opposite directions when the tide switches. That's counter to the diagram that they had in England, which always drove the wheel in the same direction, as I understand it. So that suggests that between tides, somebody had to shift something. It could be, in my mind, as simple as two bevel gears against that one we see in the picture by the nail kegs, where you slide it back when the wheel's turning one direction and slide it forward when it's turning the other. Whether there's one of those on both sides or not is really unclear. And whether they controlled the water through that wheel with gates, which one of those pictures that Bud had tonight suggests strongly, or it was done, as some of the literature suggests, strictly by an arrangement of those pilings that directed the water from whichever way it was coming against either the front or the back of the wheel.
The thing that one of the the second generation of the Kendall boys did, he described the purpose of those posts, or some of those posts that we looked at down in the water. He said that the purpose of what they did is they built a wall on either side of the wheel. They built walls on either side so that I've forgotten his term, that it pushed the water toward the pinwheel. So the pinwheel is going one way, and then it will go another when the wind changes. Unlike a windmill that's up high in the air, it will that may turn, but the windmill, the pinwheel doesn't turn, doesn't rotate from one direction to another.
And
the idea, I thought, with those pilings, thing was to do almost like a Venturi sort of thing, where you kind of compress the flow a little bit and direct it directly onto the thing. But the flow through there is pretty stupendous anyway. I've tried to pedal on that thing on the Cathance when it's going the other way, and you got some work to do if you're going to paddle upstream without anything else going on at all except for the falling on rising tide.
So you were out there in a kayak, huh?
Not when I took that picture, no, but I've been out there in my kayak, yeah.
Risking your life for science. Good for you, Harry.
And Bud, I know that the diagram is, I put those blockages in there as you had said, but do we know for sure that the wheel was always spinning the same direction?
Nope, I don't. Maybe David Hoyle, what do you think?
Hey, Bud, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, what was the question was?
Well, do we know for sure that the wheel only spun in one direction?
I remember from some of the things we've read that it changed direction. Another thing I was going to mention was that I had done a graphical estimation of the diameter of the gear that would mesh with the cogs on the perimeter of the 27-foot wheel. And it looked to me like that would have to be on the order of 5 feet. That is, it can't be a tiny gear that's meshing with the outside of that 27-foot wheel. And I would say, looking at this picture of that gear behind the nail barrel that Bud showed earlier, which I hadn't seen before, it does look like it's on that order of size.
Great.
If the wheel could change direction, then we wouldn't need the 4 gates. We'd only really need 2 gates, right?
That's what the literature suggests, is that in fact that wheel was not quite vertical and not quite exactly horizontal to the flow, but that it was directed, the flow was directed across it, and that it turned in one direction when the flood tide and the other direction on the ebb tide. And that then for they somehow had to account for that change in order for the machinery to turn in the same direction in the mills. And that piece of machinery, I have never seen any hints about the construction of how they did that little
Do-
switch.
Do the grinding stones in a mill have to always turn in the same direction?
Say again, David?
Is it possible for grindstones to turn in the opposite direction?
Yeah, you're very faint, David. No.
Oh, sorry.
I wouldn't think so, because the dressings are designed for one direction.
Yeah, the stones are cut so that they will do their work in one direction only.
Now, it is possible with belts, with basically a cross belt to reverse direction. I don't think the reversing of direction is that big a technical problem. I think the big technical problem here is in the descriptions of this wheel. The Lewiston Journal says specifically that no matter which way this contraption of more than so many feet turns, its immense periphery, its power is utilized. So it's talking, we have 2 different written descriptions that say it ran in different directions. I can understand Olympus Gregory's diagram. There are other diagrams. There are a number of mills that ran on both incoming and outgoing tides. But the wheels ran in one direction. They just changed the entry of the water with the gates, as is shown in Gregory's diagram. The problem here is that this particular wheel design does not immediately strike me as effective with water coming through it in different directions. I mean, I think this is a one-way wheel, and yet it's described as operating in 2 different directions. That makes it complicated.
Yeah. Someone asked a question to Bud. Has there been any part of this wheel recovered? Anything, on the bottom of the river that could help with this? I've
Harry's been the closest.
never dove in it,
Nobody's been able to confirm to me that anything exists any longer. And the claim is that it was basically disassembled when the second bridge was taken away. The bridge that this was originally built under was replaced by a prefab iron affair that they bought in Pennsylvania. And then that was replaced by the current bridge. And somewhere in there, most of that apparently was hauled away or disassembled or whatever.
Well, it's pretty amazing that there's still pilings in the river there, which whether they had to do with that mill or something later, hard to know, but yeah.
They'd be a lot harder to bother to pull out, I suppose. So they'd be the last thing to go. But
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't even seen my chat thing. There's a chat, let's see here. Someone suggests, wish we could get some historical placards down by the waterfront park to note this history. And maybe that can happen with the new park that's going in on that side of the river. And that's kind of it.
Good. That's the job of the
Active
Bowdoinham Historical Society.
and Wayne notes that the active leadership of the Bowdoinham Historical Society has passed to Brett Thompson. So I don't know if Brett's on this call or not, but obviously it is recorded, so he could scope it out.
Well, when in a couple of days, when
I will send you an email with a link.
when you get your note, you will be able to open the pictures, hopefully, and I hope that Ed Friedman has supplied, has put on the screen, and all of those pictures are yours to use. You can give credit to Tide Mill Institute slash Bowdoinham Historical Society.
Well, what we'll do, we'll see how big they are. I'll probably, as I say, the show will be up on the website. But what I'll also probably do is I'll convert your slides to PDFs and see how big that is, and then we can probably just put the slides up as the slideshow images on in the library or somewhere on our website there. So
it's a great mill to talk about. The history of it is fascinating, but there were only 2 generations of Kendalls because the Kendall kids, 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl, never married. And so there were no additional ones, and there were no additional relatives to save pictures and that sort of thing. We have, I think, is about all that's available, unless the trove that is in the Bath History Museum, Bath Public Library, offers you much. And I think if you plan to go there, you will find a lot.
One thing we didn't talk about was I'm assuming it's the same Kendalls. I'm not sure if it was JM Kendall, but they had like one of the biggest sheep operations in New England right here in Bowdoinham.
Right.
There's another note from Jeanette here. In Pennsylvania, there's an old historical document that indicates that it was worth a farmer's time to walk 3 days with corn on his back to get to a mill to get it ground rather than doing it himself. The millers made a ton of money and the towns grew around them. How lucrative an operation this must have been with 2 mills running off 1 wheel. Good point. So great. Well, thank you. And I'll challenge any of you folks who like history to join us next month and see the take on 4th graders have on other important aspects of the bay and river history here. And again, I'll thank Martin for coordinating this, and thank you all for coming. And most of all, Bud, thanks so much. It's great to see you again, and thanks for putting the energy into this and giving us a great presentation.
Good. Thank you, folks, and hello to people that I haven't seen for a while.
Do you want to you got a lot of people on here. Do you want to tell people how to reach you at all, Bud? Do you want to?
I meant to put up an additional slide. Yeah, if you want to take down, it's it's tidemillguy@gmail.com.
And do you want your phone number out there?
Okay, 449-8333. That's 207 area.
Great. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll end the call. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bud.
Thanks, Bud.
Thank you all.